Assalamualaikum and very good morning to all ladies and gentlemen and also our panelists for today for our discussion. Welcome for today's program. My name is MARYAM binti ROZI and I will be serving as your moderator for today's program. With the title, Don't Turn a Blind Eye, Mental Health. Before the forum begins, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. First, our first panelist is Muhammad HAIKAL bin Muhammad SAHUDIN, a first year student from Faculty of Science and Technology, and he is studying in Material Science. Next, our second moderator is DAMIA HUMAIRA binti ROSAFENDI, also a first year student from Faculty of Science and Technology, and she is also studying in Material Science. Our third panelist is SITI binti ZULKIFLI, a first year student from Faculty of Science and Technology, and also studying material science. And our last panelist is FARAHANEESA IRINA binti ZAHARI, our first year student from Faculty of Science and Technology, and she is studying in physics. Okay, before we get started, I want to take a few minutes of your time to address our big issue for today, which is mental health. A brief introduction of mental health. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood until adult. Over the course of your life, if you experience mental health problems, your thinking process, mood, and behavior could be affected. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors, life experience, and also family history of mental health problems. Okay. We're going to jump into professional point of view. According to the WHO, World Health Organizations, mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Also, some statistics from the database in Malaysia. Some 4.2 million Malaysians are suffering from some mental health issues, said Health Minister Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad. He said that based on the National Health and Morbidity Survey on 2015 study by the ministry, the prevalence of mental health issues among adults above 16 years old is 29.2%, or approximately 4.2 million Malaysians. Okay. Now that we have heard how big an issue is mental health to our society, let's begin with our first panelist, Mr. HAIKAL. What is your viewpoint on this issue, and what are the causes that can make the mental health issue nowadays become worse?
Thank you, Miss Moderator. Okay, now I'm going to talk about what what uh what the fuck. Okay. Satu, dua, tiga. Okay, thank you, Miss Moderator. And now I'm going to talk about the thing that cause one of the things that cause this mental health issue to become worse nowadays. From my point of view. Okay, in this case, I have a negative viewpoint, which is our society has been less sensitive towards basic and common sense of empathy towards other people's feeling. And the reason for this negative viewpoint is that the emergence of various social medias allows people to hurt other people's feeling anonymously without any action being taken on them. And to support my reason, I have a case from this year on May 2019. A 16 years old girl from Sarawak has committed a suicide due to a poll on her Instagram asking her to die and kill herself. And in my opinion, from this case, nowadays people take the matter of life and death very lightly due to the lack of understanding towards other people's feelings.
Since you stated that the causes or worsening of mental health is due to social media, have it ever occurred to you that social media could also give positive influence to people with mental health condition?
Oh, wow. I see that you have a really good point there. And but we are talking about the majority here. If you look closely at on the social medias or on the statistic, uh, the negative people outweigh and more than the positive people on the internet. Uh, it's like 90% of it's like 80 or 90% of the people from the internet are negative and the rest of them are positive. But I do have hope that those people will change and become better, because that's what we have to do as a human being, as a society. We have to change. We have to be good. We have to and we have to treat other people's better, so that this world will become a better place for us to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haikal. Okay, thank you, Mr. Haikal. Next, this question is for our second moderator, Ms. DAMIA. What is your viewpoint on this issue for today, and how can someone's lifestyle affect their mental health?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Okay, from my own viewpoint, I will talk about the home lifestyle and the family lifestyle, which could be related to mental health. Home environment and development skills could be related to mental health too, which is I will focus on the premature babies, which born less than 10 weeks before their own due date. As they grow up and develop, they are at risk for attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. They have higher risk than children who were full-term babies for other neurodevelopment issues, including cognitive problems, language difficulties, and motor delays. But by having more nurturing families and healthier lifestyles, they can do it without any support. How environment differentiated these kids. According to a research from Washington University School of Medicine, 27% of the very preterm children was found to be particularly resilient, and 45% of the very preterm children, although within the normal range, tend to be at the low end of normal. 13% of the very preterm kids have moderate to severe psychiatric problems, and 50% of the children display a combination of problems with inattention and with hyperactive and impulsive behavior. Okay, for my second point is mother issues and characteristics of the family environment were likely to be factors for children's significant impairment. Children with psychiatric problems came from homes with mothers who experienced more ADHD symptoms, higher levels of psychosocial stress, high parenting stress, just family dysfunction in general. Preterm children who did the best had mother with lower levels of depression and parenting stress. These children receive more cognitive stimulation with parents who read to them and did other learning type activities with them. During clinical programs, mothers who were screened for depression and other mental health issues while their babies still are patients in the NICU. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Damia. Okay, from your viewpoint, you said that people need to have a good mental health condition. May I ask you, what is the advantages of having a good mental health?
Okay, I will give you an example, which is a person who is growing up in an unusually well-off family and enjoying good physical health had a lower chance of developing mental disorders. They can score a very high score in intelligence tests. They also having a good personality traits, which they have really expressed strongly negative traits. This will lead to having a lot of friends and connections. They also have a good self-control. These people can have more education, better jobs, and higher quality relationships, and they tend to have more satisfaction with lives. So,
Alright, thank you. Let's move on to our next panelist, Miss Sarah. We have talked about mental health among adults and young teens mostly. Do you believe that only they can experience mental illnesses? And if you disagree, do you care to explain how does children at young age also experience anxiety and depression?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Okay, even children at young age can also experience anxiety and depression because even though they are at young age, they can also experience all those things. It is because due to their life situations. For examples, if they are having death of their loved one or they are having they had violence, abuse, or even serious illness, that could lead them to have anxiety and depression. So parents, I want to talk about parents. Parents play very important role in shaping their children's condition to be in a good condition. It is because some parents might aware with their children's condition, and some parents might not aware with their children's condition. So, when their children are having a mental illness, they might not unfamiliar with the symptoms or the signs. So it might be confusing for them, and they do not know how to handle or how to make the children feel better. So it's gonna be tough for them. So they need to know, they need to learn how to handle their children and getting their treatment better. So parenting has a small but significant impact to children, especially for their childhood. Okay, as I said before, it's really important for parents to know about their children's condition because it might affect their future. Because if they did not, if the children did not get the right treatment, it could lead to a serious problem, which such as social, like they they don't want to attend any social event and else. Okay, so an associate professor of education at University British Columbia said that even though children at young age they can learn how to cope with their anxiety and learn some skills to cope with their anxiety, and parents need to be aware of this. And some of the skills are parents need to help the children to face the fear. For example, if the children are afraid to swimming, they need to teach the children how to swim at the beginning. So the children could face the fear. Second is encourage the children to replace the anxious, give them motivation and give them very full support to them to face the fear. And the last one is to get the treatment. This is the best way to solve their anxiety or depression. So if you take good care of children, they're likely to grow up with a good attitude and also a healthy lifestyle. So research shows that about 80% of the children with diagnosable anxiety and disorder and 60% of diagnosable depression are not getting the right treatment. Anxiety and depression are treatable, but if they did not get the right treatment, it could be a serious problem. It is from 2015 Child Mind Institute Children Mental Health Report. So, in conclusion, parents need to be concerned and be alert about their children, about their symptoms that may happen to their children about anxiety and depression, because um, children's future is important. Thank you.
Okay, does any other panelists or audience have any objection or questions to our third panelist?
Okay, okay. If you don't mind, I'm asking. But I have something that's been lingering in my mind about what you're talking about just now. Okay. How about those children that lost both of their parents? How they should be treated?
Okay, thank you. Okay, for those children who have lost their parents and they are having anxiety because of that, it's their for me, in my opinion, their relative or their friend are the ones who should be responsible for their for their treatment to be treated. So I think that their relative especially need to give treatment to them because not only parents but for example in school, teachers are also need to be aware of children because they need to know the way they behave or if that children is behave strange from other children, that's mean they are having anxiety. So a relative or friend need to be aware of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright. Lastly, let's move on to our final panelist, Ms. Farah. At the earlier of the program, I have briefly stated some society point of view on this issue. May I ask you to elaborately explain what is the community stigma on people with mental health?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moderator. So first of all, when we're talking about my viewpoint on the community's perception on the mental illness is negative because for me, the perceptions of society towards the victim of the mental illness has always been filled with misconceptions. So before I go deeper into the community stigma towards the victim of the mental illness, let's just first understand what is stigma really is. So a stigma is a sign of disgrace which sets a person apart from the others. So mental illness has actually been stigmatized even back to the ancient times because back then in the world where they don't really understand what mental illness really are, they believe that the victims of the mental illness were actually possessed by evil spirit. So there was actually a case where they used to chip a hole in the skull of the victim of the mental illness because they believe by doing so will release the evil spirit in their head. But that was totally wrong, right? And also, individuals with mental illness were isolated, and there used to be an asylum in New York City called the Asylum for Idiots. So those kind of discriminations and misconceptions happened back in the ancient times, but thankfully, in our modern times, no such things like that happen. But the sad part is the stigma is still present. But of course, people start to learn and understand the victim of the mental illness. But I guess because of the remnants of those past images, that is why stigma is still present in our culture today. But when we're talking about the stigma on the victim of the mental illness, we're not only pointing fingers to the society itself, but we're also talking as a whole. So that includes the victim themselves. So here there are two types of stigma, which are public stigma, which is the reaction that the general population has to people with mental illness, and then the second one is the self-perceived stigma, which is the prejudice which people with mental illness turn against themselves. But our focus today is to talk about the public stigma. So there are three components which are stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. So I'll give an example of what public stigma looks like. So when we're talking about mental illness, or maybe let's say depression, usually the society has this stereotype that people with depression are crazy, they're idiots, there's something going on in their head. So when we're talking about prejudice, this will usually involve emotional reaction. So people will isolate the depressed one, and then the discrimination comes in when harassing, bullying, and violence start. Okay, and then here I'm going to list down a few effects to what the stigma has done to the victim themselves. So there will be isolation and shame, harassment, bullying, and violence, discrimination in seeking employment and housing, and it prevents the victims themselves from seeking help and getting treatment. So all of the effects that I talked about just now actually because of the society not trying to understand the victim. Instead, they choose to jump into conclusion and believing what they choose to believe. Research actually found out that the public seems to disapprove persons with psychiatric disabilities significantly more than the person who has physical illness. This actually does not make any sense to me because if we treat the person who has mental illness just as same as the person who has physical illness, we could be saving lives. But this is not what's happening in our culture today. So that is really sad. And for me, I think the public stigma towards the victims actually make the condition to the victims even worse. So that's why a lot of the victims actually thought of committing suicide. So that is all. Thank you.
That's a really good point from you. Okay, any objection or suggestion that any of you want to voice out?
I have a question for Ms. Farah. I would like to know your opinion on how to break the stigma among the community.
Okay. So I think the first approach that we can do to break the stigma in the community is to educate our people. So we have to educate our people that the mental illness is actually more common than people realize. It's actually happening all around us. Every day we see news, people are committing suicide and everything. So we can actually see that it's a common thing that's been happening in our culture today. And we need to speak out against stigma. And we need to debunk the misconceptions that depressed or maybe people with psychopenia are not actually violent, they're not crazy. So we have to talk against the stigma. And I think the stigma can be eventually eliminated with greater education and awareness about the mental illness.
Okay, now that we have finished listening to all of our panelists' point of view on the issue, don't turn a blind eye, mental health. Let's move on to the next session, the Q&A session with the audience.
Hi, may I ask something? I have something that I'm curious about. Nowadays, many people want to show that they have mental illness, though they don't. So, how could we differentiate with people with real mental, real and fake ones?
That's a very good question from the audience. Any of you want to answer the questions?
Okay. From my point of view, the point is it's really hard for us to differentiate between real and fake people with mental illness. Even the professionals such as the psychiatrists and the psychologists have a hard time to identify the symptoms. So for me, all we have to do as a society, as a human being, is just to treat those people with kindness. Because for me, it doesn't cost us any money to be kind to them. And if we do that, if we spread that kind of positivity, believe me, this world will become a better place for us to live in.
Does that answers your questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, so so for the conclusion, well, from what I have listened to from our 30 minutes forum discussions, I could conclude that social media may have worsened the mental health condition, but it also has the potential to improve, and a good lifestyle will bring a good mental health condition, and this will lead to other good aspects in life. And next, children can also fall victim to mental illnesses, and parents need to be with them through thick and thin. And finally, society need to learn how to care for other people's feelings, as sometimes words can make more damage than actions. And that is all from our forum discussion.